Hello, BookThinkers family. Today we are here with Philip Gabbard, the author of THISday. THISday was one of my favorite books from 2019. I read it in December. I bought a bunch of copies as gifts for friends and family. And so I figured we could jump on with Philip today and talk a little bit about his book, who he is. So Philip, I'd love to have you introduce yourself to everybody.
Oh, good morning. Thanks for having me. And I'm Philip Gabbard. Nick, as you said, I've gone through a journey, and I actually wrote a book. I'm a marketer, and was never, a candidate for a bucket list of something to have done in my life. But I've been a book reader, an avid, self-development, reader for years, from sales and marketing aspects, all of it. But somehow through the process, of doing all of that, I've always written, and there was just a few things in my life that were not working or not working as well as I'd like to. And part of my cathartic process is to put things out and think while I write. And THISday was born of that. And it was a real fortunate experience, but a really powerful journey experience breakthrough for me as well.
Well, let's dive into that experience just a little bit more, because as somebody who reads a lot and is an aspiring author, I'd like to write a book in the future. I'd love to know a little bit more about the process and some of the expectations you set, and also maybe if you could touch on some of the differences between your expectations of writing and releasing a book and marketing a book versus the reality of doing so.
I think, as you know me, and you've read my book, it's a different book. I write differently, admittedly so. And I think that's probably what gives this book its charm and even uniqueness, because it comes off as, it makes you think. But going back to the process, I really didn't write with an intention for effect. I was writing, I was pouring out heart and soul kind of stuff. The hardest part of writing to me authentically, and I write advertising commercials, and I have done for a long time. But as you know, I think in advertising, and marketing, when you come from the heart, you're not selling, man. THISday, I'm not trying to sell you anything, man.
Yeah.
I'm not telling you what to do with your life. So for the writing process, I just think almost write every day. It's not a someday thing for you. It's a
THISday thing.
It's a THISday thing.
Yeah.
Write today, and because you'll get better and better over time. And then it's scary as hell, man, to hit send on this thing. As Seth Godin said, you have to hit send. It's scary to release it and to put, all of my, emotions out into the world for consideration and judgment and so forth.
Well, so what sort of expectations did you set for the book itself, or did you have any expectations as far as how many copies you were going to sell and what sort of feedback you were going to receive from people? And then what was the reality of that as well?
I think that's a great question. I think there's hope in this anticipation of things that, what's going to happen. You know what I knew would not happen if I didn't do this? If I didn't share this book, I would have once again limited myself. And I want to be unlimited. And I wanted to be prepared to go there. And I am trying everything that I can to, have people, read this book and talk with people like you. And I'm just thrilled that I've connected with you. This book changes people. It helps people. And it does it in a really curious way.
Yeah, it does.
As far as expectation, I hope the world reads it,
Yeah.
But if it's a few thousand people, 10, 100,000, I don't know. We'll see. We're just starting, right?
We are. It's a long process, right? It requires patience. And so one of the quotes in the book that I wanted to touch on briefly, and then I know there's something you want to discuss as well, comes from a playlist title called "So What Is on the Other Side of This Whatever Nag?" And the quote right here, I'm going to read it for everybody, and then we can reflect on it for a minute, is, "Why is it that as kids, we live our youth unabridged and full of self-expression? Then at some unknown yet definitive point, we transfer our outward selves to an inward self full of known limitations. Tell me, is it an act or a conversation that closes the door on possibility and ends our youth? And that's the quote. The reason that I wanted to bring that up is that I found in my life, as I transitioned from child to adult, I lost almost all of my creativity. And I lost all of my creativity because we're scared to put ourselves out there. We have insecurities that form. Society puts specific expectations on how we're supposed to act, how we're supposed to work, who we're supposed to work for, etc. And I
Right.
became a very boring. Oh, did we lose audio?
No. I mean,
Oh, okay. I became a very boring person. I really did. I lost all the creativity. There's no juice, I just sort of
yeah.
lost it all. And so that happened at a very specific point. I don't know what it was. But then through intense and very direct creativity cultivation,
Yeah.
through creating content for Instagram and things like that, I started to flex that area of my brain more and I became more creative. So I wanted to touch on that. Like, why do you think that happens?
I think for a few reasons. In your case, I think, we all go through process and phases and we might tap into some old resources and ancestral resources that come back out at another time in our life. But
Mm-hmm.
specifically with the whatever nag quote, I think a lot of times life conforms us. This is my big argument, is that there's so much conformity.
Mm-hmm.
What to be like, how to think, how to act, say this when they say that. That kids are born fully self-expressed, man. You can run naked down the aisle of a shopping mall and be yelling top of your lungs, but you turn 12, 13, 14, and all of these conformities start hitting you, and it muffles you, it silences you,
Yeah, it's true.
and unfortunately it can just snuff you out. So that is one aspect of it. And the other aspect of it, Nick, is we as parents, we as bosses, we as friends and lovers, what do we snuff out of relationships when I want to make
Yeah,
somebody conform to how I am? And so what I was trying to do here is be a better human with my language and how my words can affect you, and my thoughts can affect you, and my feelings can affect you. And the last thing I want to do to any human anymore is snuff them out,
sure.
and stifle them. And I think just having a more greater consciousness of our words and the impact and the power of our words is life changing, and also our listening.
Yeah, yeah, it's a great point. And I feel what you just said while I'm reading this book. So you convey that really well. We are all humans. This is part of the human experience. This book is a representation of your human experience.
Yeah,
And it doesn't read like a book, it reads like a playlist of life, like you kind of allude to. And
kind of
so,
random.
yeah, it's random, but in the best way. Like
Yeah.
if you're in a rhythm, kind of like you're in flow listening to music, it all works together. Like you're in there and there's ups and downs and lefts and rights, but it's all one story. It's this story. You know what I mean? And
You know
so
what?
I really
I want to tell you
appreciate
one
that.
last thing out of the creative process,
Sure.
and maybe we can. I know we're on a time crunch, but I want to say that my original manuscript was laden with music and
Ah.
lyrics. Okay,
Mhm.
and the editor and publisher were like, "There we go," and it wasn't even a consideration to keep those elements, and that was the genesis of the playlist. To be honest with you, because I didn't want a
Mm.
table of contents.
Yeah.
Okay, because this is a nonconformity book, um, and and that was the genesis of creativity. When something was taken away, in its place, what could we create? Here I was saying, I write different, I speak different, I think different. How can I have a book that articulates that without me being a conformist to everything that books traditionally have in them?
You had to
So
do it. Yeah.
we, gave each other pushback, and I did a full rewrite on the beginning, and, and all of a sudden that one thing gave THISday some symmetry throughout that does do exactly like you say. It's a playlist, man. It's random. There's hits and, oh yeah, I remember that one. And, things that the words to. But I
Yeah.
did have to take the music out. That did get nixed.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, we'll see in the future how you decide to deliver future content.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm working on my voice still. And this is an extension of my journey.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I think we are over 10 minutes, so we'll just
Okay.
cut whatever we want for Instagram and we'll continue the conversation here for a couple more minutes because as we talked about before we jumped on and press record, there was another item and theme in the book that you wanted to talk a little bit more about. So why don't we volley it back over to you?
Okay. Well, I think one of the elements that I felt most relevant at this point, obviously, I make strong mention at the end of the book about Teddy Roosevelt's quote that was the man in the arena. The critics who complain, they have no value. It's the man in the arena, the man who is muddied and dirty and sweating and grinding
Yeah.
to make a difference in his life. Many of us know this quote, and it's fantastic. It's inspired me for many years. But I specifically pick apart this quote because of one small fragment that is mentioned in there about poor and timid souls, and that's the part that my process, the THISday process, makes me think about and raise my hand and speak up against that. Brene Brown talked about that she named her book Daring Greatly specifically because of this very, very powerful quote.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that deep, but I wanted to say, this is where our pursuit of understanding, it's tougher as we age, as we go through our ups and our downs in our lives. I've been in the arena, man. I have fought at, not just as an athlete, but as a corporate leader, as a high, paid, sales machine.
Mm-hmm.
And I've
I get
stumbled
that.
too.
Yeah.
And I stumbled too, like we all have, will, and continue to do so. But it's the poor and timid souls that I had a problem with, is that sometimes we can fall and feel like a poor and timid soul. And we continuously have to pick ourselves up. And so I think I heard you say the other day, maybe it was from one of the, maybe it's Atomic Habits or another book that you mentioned, is that motivation doesn't last, habits do.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah. Ed Milet in his book Max Out Your Life, he says that it's not the most motivated people that win, it's the most consistent people that win.
yeah, it's a great quote. And so there's a lot of us who have to figure out how we pick ourselves up continuously, time and again. And some of
Yeah.
us struggle early in life, some of us struggle midlife, some of us struggle end of life. But Marcus Aurelius says, we're not taking any of this with us. We're human.
Mm-hmm.
There's fame and celebrity and fortunes, and it all matters not. It's the poor and timid souls. We are all poor and timid souls from time to
Mm-hmm.
time. And that's really what I wanted to address, because I think there's deep value and connectivity in these words. Again, THISday makes you think, and I'm glad to have shared, from my heart, all of these words. And I hope, truthfully, I hope it changes your world, everyone's world that reads it.
Yeah, well, as we've jokingly talked about in the past, it's a very hard book to describe and it's a very hard book to review because it's so different.
Yeah.
And this is an experience that I may share that most people that watch this video don't, but I read and review a lot of books. I read a lot of books by design because in my life, I'm a believer that it's helping me to progress on a daily basis. But I also read books, a lot of books, and review a lot of books for this Instagram. And so I find myself reading a lot of books that fall into that normal category, and they never make it to Instagram. I read a
Right.
lot of books that I think they don't provide a lot of value. They try to tell you what to do instead of cultivate thought. And your book was very much on the opposite end of that boring spectrum, because it was so different that it kept you awake. It's not going to put you to sleep. It's
Yeah.
creating thought. It's not you're not just reading, you're interacting, and that's important. It's very important for the reader, because we have so much that falls into that, that conformity side of the spectrum. It's
Well, let me
they're
ask you a
hounded
question.
into doing similar things. Yeah, go ahead.
I, I you and I talked before. I was raised on self-help. I was an athlete, a D1 big old, 300-pound offensive lineman, man.
Yeah.
You know, I crushed heads and had to be inspired and got bloodied, nosed, and hurt, and get back in there, and those kind of mentalities. And I went into sales, and I read every sales book and every training book and every have to and how to
Yeah.
book. But I got a sense that there was important things that maybe I needed to learn, and I did learn and became very proficient and efficient at. But I began becoming suspect a little bit of the manipulative behaviors of do this when they say that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, it became a little bit bothersome to me. And so, not to give pushback, terribly, but um, that was the exact book I did not want to have out in the world,
Sure.
with my name on it. It's been done. And I think kind of what you were saying, you read through them, you see all of them, you read, way more than most humans, but you see through it, and you've seen this happen in your own experience. Some books are very contrite and contrived and try to tell you how to fix yourself in 12 easy steps.
Mm-hmm.
you know
Yeah. And yeah, there is a lot of that. And I think it's effective because it can help specific people. But like you said, when you've been in that world for so long, maybe it's through repetition, maybe it's through experience, maybe it's through I don't know, willful ignorance. But when you've been in that space for so long, eventually you start to get a little bit curious. Like, is this the best way? Is this all there is? Is this the most effective way to be human? Maybe
hmm
it's not. And I don't think it is either. It's effective for a reason, but just like you, eventually there's an inflection point, just like we talked about earlier, where you become more insecure, but then there's an inflection point where you become more aware almost. And your appetite changes from something like that to something like this,
yeah.
where you can, I don't know, think more, words for the vulnerable and the venerable, modern essays of enlightenment. Like enlightenment, it's that, when do you become enlightened? I think when you can identify with something like this just as much as that or more than that. Does it
Yeah,
make sense?
absolutely. I mean, enlightenment to me is when you allow the light to shine, right? Let the
Mm-hmm.
light in and expose things that you hadn't seen before. I hope I never, you know, quit letting the light in on things. These books and these elements in our life, um, they're tools in a toolbox. I hope we, can recall them. You've learned so many things and heard so many things that you wish that in a certain, when your words really matter most, in a really tender or sensitive situation in work, in relationship, in family, and in life, I hope that you pull that book and this book and that, whatever. I hope you generate the best words possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope they come from a space of not trying to control or manipulate. I hope they come from a space that really allows communication. I hope, if you're talking to your child, who do you want to show up as?
Mm-hmm.
Some asshole that some other said, some other person who said, this is how we need to teach people and control and dominate? Or do you really want to nurture this young soul for, so you have relationships for years and ahead.
Yeah.
Our words fracture things, but people like me and you, when we read these books, we learn some things that we can, karate chop some people with things we've learned, and
Sure.
and but I just think there's a more conscious effort needs to be made with how we select and deliver, and then probably mostly how we hear.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
All very wise words in all words that I identify with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for spending time with me today, Nick. And that hat looks fantastic on you.
Yeah. Let's get close up there for the camera. Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for sending it
I've
over.
got mine too, man. I just don't look as handsome in my hat as you do. So.
All a matter of opinion.
Yeah, we'll
Well,
Photoshop
yeah. Well, thank you so much for the conversation today, Philip. I really enjoyed it, and I hope that some people stuck around and got to listen to our entire conversation. For anybody that's watching this video, please reach out to Philip. He's very open for conversation, and he likes to talk about the book. So if you've read it, give him some feedback. If you haven't read it, pick up a copy, and we can end the conversation there. Before I go, Philip, what's the best way for people to reach you?
I'm most active on Instagram. It's where I'm kind of in this comfortable space, and I'm at THISday 365. You'll see me around.
Perfect. All right. Take care. Have a good one.
Thanks, Nick.